All right, let's get started, everyone. Thank you, everyone, for joining us. I'm sure we'll have a lot more people rolling in, but for the sake of time and everybody's lunch hour, we will get started on time. We are very happy to have Representative Stephanie Howse with us today for our inaugural luncheon with the League. Happy New Year, everyone, and Happy New General Assembly. We are going to say lots of prayers to the higher power that you believe in for a good year ahead for all of us, considering all that 2020 brought us. But I can't think of a better way to start my Monday and to start our year than with a great program like this. I want to thank our director, Jen Miller, for helping us get this set up. And I especially want to thank Michael Barron for really being the catalyst behind this and the driver behind this wonderful program. We will have many more of these throughout the year. And as I had mentioned, Representative Stephanie Howse is getting us started today with our first luncheon with the League. She is a member of the Ohio House of Representatives representing District 11, which is the Cleveland area. She assumed office in 2015 and was re-elected in the most recent general election for another 2-year term. And we're just going to let her get started. Thank you, Representative Howse.
Well, good morning or good afternoon. Thank you so much for that introduction. Again, I want to thank the League of Women Voters. Special shout out to Michael Barron for connecting with me and the group for extending the invitation for me. So in these couple of minutes, I just really wanted to get into, I would say, setting the tone for us to have an enriching conversation. I will not talk long because I really believe, we all can definitely have Zoom fatigue. And so I will definitely be interested in engaging and having conversations and Q&A. With that, though, to get us started, I always would like to just talk about I would say like state government 101, really Ohio history 101 in terms of the policies that we enact. And so that's where we're getting started. So first slide, as you can see, Ohio was founded in 1803, right? So we had a group of white men who organized Ohio, which is the Ohio General Assembly as we know it. From 1803, next you will see the first African-American was elected in 1880. It is George Washington Williams, first African-American legislator. He has a very, I would say, just enriching story. He only served one term, and it's a lot of his story about that. But from there, from the first African-American legislator to serve, we go to the first group of women. I know we recently celebrated the centennial passage of the 19th Amendment, right, that granted women the right to vote, and that was in 1920. And from that law, what you will see is the first group of women who were able to serve in the Ohio General Assembly, which happened in 1922. There were 6 women. Next slide. Yep, 1922, you can see all of their names here. And again, what you can see here is from the result of when there are changes in policies, you can actually have some positive momentum. All right, from there, 1922, because like we said, in 1920, it granted white women the opportunity to vote. From there, we go to the first African-American woman. It was in 1978, where you see C. Helen Rankin. She's out of Cincinnati. She's the Honorable Rankin is still alive today. And she was the first woman to join the Ohio General Assembly. From there, we are making our ways to the 1990s. In 1995, we have the Honorable John Garcia, who was the first Hispanic to serve in the Ohio General Assembly. Now we'll get up to present day, right? Final slide. So we covered when we convened, right? We organized Ohio. Then you have the African-American man, you had a group of white women, you have a Black woman, you have a Hispanic man. And so I always will start, the question is, what would you be able to do if you had a 77-year start? if you had a 119-year start, if you had a 175-year start, or even a 218-year start and counting, when you consider there's not been an Indigenous person serving in the Ohio General Assembly, there's not been a Latina woman to serve in the Ohio General Assembly, you have not had any of our brothers and sisters in the AAPI community, and so forth. What could you do if you make the rules without the consideration of everyone else? So now, as I'm going into the 134th General Assembly, those things always are playing in my mind, right? Because we have to be honest about where we are and having rules that were not designed for the masses of people to be successful in Ohio. And what do we do to fix it? It's not enough just to get to a point of acknowledging it, which we still have a lot of work to do there. It's but then what? How do we truly create policies and practices so that families can really thrive, right? Fulfill that American dream here in the great state of Ohio for some, but not for all. And so when I think about, some of my priorities, and we're finished with the presentation, so you can take it off. When I think about what my role is and what I'm trying to do to serve the constituents, not only in House District 11, but for all citizens here in Ohio, it's always a matter of we have to start in truth and honesty, and that is very, very hard for people. As we have seen the actions of last week. And I'm not going to even really get into that. I know we all have had different emotions, feelings, but you see just on so many different levels of this place where America, when they talk about the browning of America, that is very, very scary. To which you listen to conversations for people, for I would say a lot of white men. It's very scary, and we are starting to see when the world has been designed around you, and now we're getting the shift because you have to acknowledge everyone else. We are getting this pushback. And so having the conversations about racism and just getting people to just acknowledge just humanity, right? Many of us have been, or some people have been indoctrinated with a thought that they're the only ones, their view of life, their way of life is the only way to be. And if you accept someone else, then it's going to take away from you. And it's a really, really, it's just a disturbing mindset that has been enacted in the policies of Ohio. And so as I, begin the 134th General Assembly, looking for suggestions, opportunity of how to engage in open and honest dialogue around racism, and how do we begin to push forward in policies where we can do the healing, but also do the repair and the restoration for people who have been destroyed as a result of our policies, right? I also am looking at, when we talk about the economic relief, right? Because we are in a global pandemic, and COVID-19 has caused havoc in our world, in our society, in our communities. But that havoc has not been equal, right? So when you look at, our Black community, other communities of colors, when we look at women, right? The how do I describe it? The brunt of I would just say just a burden that women have had to take on when we look at the disruption in our educational system, right? Women having to quit their jobs to go back to the child care, economically, what will that mean in the future when you think about retirement, savings, how you take care of each other, knowing that Ohio is in a place where we are older than a lot of other states. And this economic shift that has happened as a result of COVID-19 will have some significant financial impacts on our economy and on families. And we have to talk about it and really think about ways to support families and women so that in the longer term, the impacts of today will not lead to continuing devastation in the future. There are opportunities around our justice system, again, for all the variety of reasons, as I talked about, organizing of Ohio. And then again, I would say ending off with education. We started some work. There was a lot of work that was done in the previous two GAs from former Representative Patterson and now the current speaker. And hopefully that will continue in this General Assembly, getting us over the hump of actually beginning to address the inequities and unconstitutional nature of how we fund schools, because education is a pathway to break the cycle of generational poverty. And being a person, I represent House District 11, where the average household income is around $22,000, which unfortunately is the lowest in the state. It is always on my mind of how do we break generational poverty to get people in this state, in my community, in our community, in a place where they are not always pressed, just trying to succeed. And like I said, live the American dream right here in our state, in our communities, regardless if you're in Cleveland or if you're in Darke County or wherever else. So that I will put a pause in it right there, open it up for us to have a dialogue. Again, I want to thank the League of Women Voters for extending an invitation for me this day, and really looking forward to engaging so that we can think about ways that we as a community, and I'm saying like a universal community, can connect to have policy practices in place that truly benefit all, and not intentionally done to the benefit of one at the expense of other. There is a better way. I know we can get there, and I am just really encouraged to see all of your faces here and knowing there is some interest in the policies that we are setting forth here in Ohio. So thank you so much.
Representative Howse, thank you so much. I have to tell you, your introduction took me off guard for a minute, and I was wondering, where is she going with this? During a talk like this, typically, representatives or legislators may talk about their own policy initiatives. And I really appreciate where you put us in this moment. And just yesterday, as I was preparing for this, as well as another initiative that I'm working on about civic engagement, I was reviewing some notes, and something that I have always preached, for lack of a better word, is that the success of one equals the success of many, that as a community, we are all in the same boat. And that when successful individuals make up a community, and a successful community needs to uplift all of the individuals within that community, right? And that the way that you put that the idea that the disadvantage of some within our communities is going to be to our advantage, or to that you can only uplift yourself by somebody else's disadvantage, is a false narrative, right? And we need to continue to preach that this is a false narrative, that the more of us are successful, the more success, like there's not a finite mark on success, right? The more we help people to be successful, the more our communities will be successful. So I really appreciate you starting us off on that note. As I was getting to know you a little bit better over the past weekend, I found it really interesting that your mother was also a legislator and a state representative. And I'd like to just talk about your personal background to begin with. I know that I'm sure was an inspiration for you. Did you always see yourself getting into politics and running for office, or was there a certain catalyst that pushed you to run for office?
So yeah, I would say that I grew up, always, I would just say just being a person involved in everything, right? You just grow up that way. I would say community organizing was just something that was instilled in me, growing up. My mom was the president of our street block club. She was a precinct committee person. You see what I'm saying? So when you grow up in a home like that, you just think it's very normal to be engaged. And that just really carried throughout my life. I was my class president in high school. I was in student government in college. So like running for office, winning and losing has just been a part of my life, for a very long time. And I know it was centered on, the example of my mom, Annie Keith. Love my mama. Mm-hmm. So yes, she did a good job.
She sure did. She sure did. We love our mamas, and she raised an amazing woman. So you've held this position since 2015, and I'd love to hear from you. What are the things that have changed in the State House since you began office as a state representative? And also, how have things changed in the State House, as well as how have they changed for you since you began in this position?
Wow. So how has the State House changed? Man, okay, how has it changed? I mean, well, you always have new people, right? So that's one of the things. The people coming in, people coming out of the legislature is a consistent change. I've had a new speaker each General Assembly, give or take. A lot of reasons for bad reasons, all of them for bad reasons. I mean, that's just, hey, that's what it is.
Put it out there.
And then so those are the changes. I would say just the makeup and what has not remained the same, unfortunately, we, being a Democrat trying to break the supermajority, have not been successful in doing that. We've made some steps forwards, and we've taken some steps back. We still haven't cracked that next point of breaking the supermajority, which is vitally important. For myself, though, how have I changed? I think, coming into the General Assembly, I would tell people, like, I'm an engineer by training. And so my mind just goes to, let's fix the problem. You know what I'm saying? Like, I don't like having a whole bunch of meetings, doing a lot of talking. Like, we know what the problem is. There's a data set that these are the things, let's fix it, right? And so a lot of times I approach things, which I think is just common sense. This is what we should do, because this is what the information is telling us. And I have really gotten to a point where I really understand that's just not how the General Assembly works, right? This is a relationship business. Like, you have to work, develop relationships with people, whether you like them or not. And that has been really, it's been much harder for me to grasp hold of that than I would have initially imagined, right?
And not to cut you off, but I would also just interject to say that's a really good lesson for anybody in advocacy, right? Like, anybody listening, because I would say probably even just as an advocate on the outside, that was something that was important for me to learn as well.
Yeah, so that's kind of, I'm now at this place where, like, okay, if it's 2% of a person that I can deal with, I'm only going to engage in the 2%. Mm-hmm. And that's it. So
that is, like I said, that's a really sometimes difficult thing for us to learn as human beings. I think many of us, like, you see a problem, let's fix it, especially if that is your orientation. But that's really interesting to hear. So through through this time, I want to say you come off as a really hopeful person, despite all your years in the State House and, the political landscape not necessarily being in the favor of your party. And still, you come off as a hopeful person. Who are your role models, or who is your role model, and what gives you hope today for you to keep on doing the work that you're doing?
So I would say I have a lot of role models. First and foremost, starting with my mom. She has just Like my mother is the type of woman who can find good in anybody, right? You know, like growing up in a neighborhood, you know what I'm saying? Anyway, growing up in the 90s, like when you say like people that may have their faults, that may be addicted, you know, substance abuse, my mother always found the best in people, right? That's something I'm learning because I haven't gotten there yet. But I know that's kind of like my role model. I understand and I know that is how you should operate, right? You know, in this space, I can say role models of Senator Sandra Williams, who I have, you know, followed in the House, and who is just astute when it comes to policy and practices, knowing this stuff in or out, has developed relationships. And it's like, dang, you know, again, things I need to work with. I always will give a shout out to entering the General Assembly. Shout out to the Diva Caucus, Leader Amelia Sykes, Representative Janine Boyd, former Representative Christy Bryant Coons, you know, where it was a group of women when I joined the legislature in 2015, where we didn't know each other, right? But we made a commitment to each other that we had each other's back, because when you understand you are in a place that was never created for you, it can be very hard and it can be lonely. And those group of women in particular have helped me, cried with me, fought with me, laughed with me, and it has helped me to at least continue on. Because there's some days where you say there's hope. There's some days where you feel like I'm good. I do not want to do this. It is too much. But having that group of women, that partnership, that sisterhood has really, really helped me. And so, I mean, there are many more, but just for the context of this conversation, those were my, I would say, starting role models and my current role models now.
Thank you for sharing that with us. I think it's helpful for people to hear that that this is a hard job, and in any hard job, you need support. Like, it's not expected for you to you know, forge through necessarily on your own. So thank you for sharing that with us. I want to move to kind of like some more policy issues. So I know that you are have been a big advocate in the past of finding common interests between urban and rural Ohio communities. Do you feel in the current political landscape that we're in, are there opportunities for the Ohio legislature to find common interests between urban and rural Ohio communities?
There's always an opportunity, right? There's always an opportunity. It's just a matter of if those that are currently leading, setting the agenda, if they are open to that. Many times where we set, there have been groups of people that have been able to continue to be successful, keeping the divides, right? They don't necessarily see a pathway to keeping their positions in power by bringing people together. And so I don't know if that will actually be a reality, you know, at this moment. All I can say is, beyond the people that are in places of power in the General Assembly, I think it's very important for community members to seek out the opportunities to build bridges where you know there is a bridge, right? It may not be evident. There has been intentional effort to keep us apart. And so that's one of the things that it's on my mind sometimes. I think I've taken a step back from building the bridges, you know, because again, you can't build a bridge when home isn't taken care of. And I'm focusing my energy on like building a home, right? My own, you know, my own community, my own neighborhood, yes, so that people can even be in a position to connect with others. Hey, baby, what's the baby name? Now tell us what the baby name is.
Baby's name is Omar.
Hi, Omar. Okay, hey, Omar. Okay.
He'll come in a little while.
It's cool. It's cool. It's cool.
He's hanging out for now. So I'd like to build on that thought about building bridges, and you know, in all the increasing bipartisan effort to divide and conquer, both on the state level and on the national level, I'd love to get your take on how do you think people can build bridges, like people who are listening today, not just in the, you know, state house necessarily, but you know, a lot of people aren't necessarily even ever going to call or meet with their legislator. Building bridges with your neighbor or building bridges on some kind of organizational level. What can people do? Where can people go? Who can they talk to start bridging these divides in their community, which I think and I hope would lead to bridging the divides in places like the State House?
Yeah, so I always think about, you just start where you are. You know, a lot of times people are really fabulous, organizers, connectors, I would say in their places of worship, in communities, in their place of business. But then when you look on their block, they can't tell you 5 neighbors, right? Mm-hmm. And I really think this is an opportunity where, you got to just go back to old school. Before we had all this technology, you had to literally do that sweat work, just put on your shoes, go talk to your neighbor, and begin to just get to know each other. Once you get to, and I always tell people also too, and one thing we got to keep in mind is you don't fight with people you don't know. You're not going to fight for people you don't know, right? And so as many opportunities we have to get to know people, things reveal themselves, right? It reveals when you get to know people, you get to know if there's a true shared interest. And you also will get to know that we will never have a connection, right? Because that's a reality. That's part of it too. Everybody is not going to want the same outcome, being connected, building a community for all to be successful. And you need to know that information so that you can know how to neutralize them and continue to go to the people and the places that see our world, our communities as a place for all and not a select few.
Thank you. So I want to move on to voting rights issues. The League, as you may know, we do engage on a lot of social justice issues, but the bread and butter of our work, the core work, is in voting rights issues. Do you see an opening for further rights progress in Ohio in this GA on measures like absentee ballot request or automated voter registration or any other measures that, do you feel like there's an in through the State House this year, GA?
Whew, okay. So, honestly, I don't necessarily see it in that way just from the current legislative makeup, because wherever people, I'll explain it this way. So we have a majority who has continued to be successful without supporting these things, right? Yeah. And so what incentive is it for them to expand voting rights when they have gained momentum without it? I'm just saying, just in a very natural way.
In a very practical, yeah.
Right, and I think this is the thing we have to understand. How have they been able to engage the people that are currently in the General Assembly? What have they talked about, the majority of people? And I can tell you voting rights and the access to the ballot box has not been that. And they have been successful at it, right? But there are opportunities in the mobilization of people, right? When you see that people are bringing things like a statewide initiative, right? To put all these things on the ballot. If it was on the ballot, I know without a shadow of a doubt, it would pass. Right? So if there was a group of people that, again, put forth a ballot initiative and the legislature saw that, then they will act, because we are reactionary. We're not proactive. We react based on the tide of the masses. And so this is where I would say the League of Women Voters, you have a statewide network. And if this is something that you want the legislature to move on, always trying to see if you can get those that are in leadership to move in this direction. But if they don't, looking at your alternative actions to get them then to move and react.
Other than the things that have kind of been not worked in this past GA, like the ones that I mentioned, do you see an opening for any progress? Like, what do you think are the most likely things to work or to pass along the, in voting rights? Whether it be whether it be through the GA or through referendum or through whatever?
I mean, again, with this General Assembly, it is hard to tell. I mean, it's going to be really different. You know what I'm saying? I mean, just being in a body where we have a new a speaker and not fully understanding kind of dynamics between the House and the Senate with the governor's office. I mean, a little kind of grasped a little bit of it last year. And even when you have members of the majority, like they have a Secretary of State who, depending on the day, will talk about some things around expanding like voter access, and then it still falls upon deaf ears. It's like, if you're not listening to those who are considered leaders within your own party, right, who are you listening, and what is the pathway forward? And so I'm not trying to be dismissive of saying I don't know. It's just
no, I completely understand. I mean, I will tell you,
I don't know, right?
Those who have been with League for a long time, and I always say this as well, any worthwhile struggle has always been a struggle, right? It has taken sometimes up to generations, and I always use the right of women to vote. That the first women who fought for the right to vote did not vote, right? And so we always have to remember that it's bigger than ourselves, that we are fighting for a cause. We're not fighting just for ourselves. But I appreciate your being forward and being honest on that. And kind of along the same lines, I'd love to talk about, Ohio will be redrawing the legislative and congressional maps this year. Any thoughts on how we can best end up with maps that are more fair and less gerrymandered?
Yeah. Okay, so I will always say for people of really working to engage so we know the members that will be on the Redistricting Commission. They have not met as of yet. And so we do know we are on a very short timeline when it comes to whenever the federal government will release the information that will be the basis of the redistricting and redrawing of the lines. In some respects, there are some people who have a philosophy of just delay, and then we'll do what we want. I think having those connections with our commission members, with legislators in the Ohio General Assembly, because we have the task of actually doing it, and letting the desires of what people wanted to be put forth, of having fairer districts, keeping that up top of mind. Within that, though, there are political realities, understanding that we still have the predominance of those that are in the majority that can just set the tone, and they can just wait it out, right? Regardless of the courts, will we have 10-year maps or will we have 4 to 6 year maps? That remains to be seen. But I do think there is an opportunity, right, to just engage with people, having and setting up, forums and connection points where community members can now talk about, if you are in a community that has been gerrymandered, well, what would you like the borders to look like, right? I think these are conversations and engagements that we can offer that information to legislators like myself, so people can't say, well, we didn't know what the people wanted, right? And so I think we always have to believe that our voice is important, and collectively we can shape and move people. We have to be willing to work together, though.
Thank you. I just want to acknowledge, somebody had written in the chat that there's some excellent questions in the chat. Are we gonna have time to address those? I am gonna be moving through some of the questions in the chat, and I do apologize if we did not get to your questions. I do want to tell you, I encourage you to write to Representative Howse to get her views on whatever your questions are, and I'm sure that somebody from her office will get back to you. Our time is limited today, but we're gonna work through as many questions as we can. And thank you for being with us again today, Stephanie Howse. So probably just about 5 more minutes of your time if you can still be with us for that long. So one of the major things that we engage on other than voting rights is education. We have a question from the audience. Do you expect the proposed changes to education funding will be rolled out in the next budget? Will it actually help the urban districts that have the most low-income students?
We will see. I mean, the reality is that the amount of economic investment that will go in, that needs to go into educating our children in an equitable way, we as a state have not, I would say, done the work to see how much do we really need to fund education and then put forth a plan to fully fund it. And so as part of this upcoming budget, not knowing the impact COVID-19 has had on our budget and if or how, like if and how much money, less money we will have to work with, because that is what is projected. And so if we have less money, will we expand the investment in education? That is still to be decided. I would hope that we would at least look at some of the work that had been done with the school funding bill and put some of those things in place, specifically the investment. We have like 8 categories that they're supposed to do some research around. And I hope we would at least invest in those things so we can get to a place where Ohio can just say how much it would cost and then begin to do that work. So.
Thank you. I thought this was a really interesting question. Thank you for whoever put this one out there. I'm not sure if you can speak to this, Representative Howse. What can we learn from vote mobilization efforts in Georgia, such as Stacey Abrams' Fair Fight?
Listen to Black women. No, I'm not. No, I mean, I'm serious, but beyond listening to Black women.
I'll take it. I think we all need to take it.
I mean, like, for real, like, we have a lot of amazing, talented people in our state. And, you know, and as you can see, like, look at and identify people in places who are actually doing work, invest in them, right? Actually invest in them so that they can expand the work, as well as making sure that people in our communities are connected and communicating with each other and moving in a shared vision, right? For far too long, we have different power structures, different funding angles where people only want to give to their person, whether it's the person that has been effective or not. And I think those individuals who are in control of the purse strings have to reevaluate, have you truly been getting the return on your investment? Mm-hmm. And if you have not, looking to possibly doing a shift of investing in some people in places where you might not know them all like that, but they've been producing. You know what I'm saying? And your investment can go a long way. And if you are a connector, are there some opportunities just to connect people who are just really dope and doing amazing work in Ohio? And can you bring them together so that they can have their dopeness together and push Ohio forward? So it's just, you know, between the money and the people, I'm always definitely leaning on the people, but you can't do the work without the money. So we got to get those folks to come together and we can see some great things in Ohio. We just have to be willing to listen and work with people that we might not necessarily work with before.
Thank you. And I just want to say, I know that you have a background of working with youth and being a mentor to youth, and I hear that in you right now. Invest in the people. That is one of the main things that I have learned. I actually come from a youth mentorship background as well. I did like about 10 years of community work with youth before coming to state advocacy. So invest in young people, invest in women, invest in people with potential, right? That have not necessarily been on the front stage before, but you know, once you put them there, they are going to bring results. I'm gonna round up with one last question. given all of the restrictions that advocacy groups and constituents who typically engage with their legislators have because of COVID, and especially as far as I know, there's still not being a mask mandate in the State House. What are your suggestions for people and organizations to lobby their legislators and to meet with their legislators?
Well, I will always say, I kind of just gave a group some of my suggestions first. If you are a part of an organization, reach out to your legislators, both in the House and the Senate, to reintroduce yourself. If you have some type of convening meeting, from that point, understand what your legislators, what their priorities are, and share with them what your priorities are. See if there is some synergy. Understand how people like to communicate, right? So you know how you want to be and your organization would like to be communicated with. Find out how the legislators, how they communicate, and then begin to engage in those formats. A part of that communication plan is what happens in an emergency, right? If there's a 24-hour action that needs to happen, what are the communication channels that will work out? Begin the work now to offer yourself, if you have like experts in whatever your subject matter may be, offer yourself and or your organizations to be subject matter experts as legislation is unfolding, as people are having interested party meetings, that they maybe want to offer and share to other colleagues, knowing what your priorities are as an organization, and then looking for opportunities to partner with legislators as you're doing the work. Right. We all love to have FaceTime and connect with constituents, and the opportunities that community members, community organizations provide to legislators, I guess that also continues to build on the relationship. So as the work is happening, you can be on top of their mind. So those are kind of my couple of.
Those are actually a lot of great recommendations. So thank you for those. Those are all the questions I have for you today. Do you want to finish us off with any closing remarks?
I would just say, I want to thank you all for extending this invitation to me. If there was someone who asked a question that I did not get a chance to answer, please know that you can reach out to me, at my state house is rep11@ohiohouse.com. .gov, excuse me, or you can reach out. The phone number is 614-466-1414, and then on social media at Stephanie Howse, and I can engage that way. Some, depending on where it is, I might be a little bit delayed, but I will respond to you. So again, thank you all so much for all that you do. We are still in a global pandemic, so I will encourage everybody, practice proper hygiene, wear your mask, social distance, and also in this time, give people a little bit of grace. You know what I'm saying? A lot of us are under immense pressure and stresses, and all of us are not taking proper care of ourselves because we're just doing the work. But extend a little bit of grace to each other. Love on people a little bit, and just do something kind of nice for somebody, not because they asked, just because you can, to change, just to change their day or their mindset. So thank you all for all that you do. Happy 2021, and let's get to work because we got a lot of work to do.
Thank you, Representative Howse. I really enjoyed speaking with you. Thank you to everyone who attended. Thank you for everyone for your questions. And I really apologize if we did not get to them today. I'm sure that we could stay here for much longer speaking to the wonderful Representative Howse, but I sure learned a lot from you. I hope that everybody enjoyed their afternoon today, and everybody have a great week. Omar's gonna say bye. Can you say bye? Say bye.